again, we're on the 5th video, meaning we're just over halfway through this tutorial series. Today, we're going to be using speed controllers for robot subsystems, and the example I'm going to be using is a simple intake. We're going to be creating the subsystem and then hooking it up to a command so that we can intake and outtake. First of all, create your subsystem and call it something relevant. Since it's an intake for me, I'm calling mine intake subsystem. I'm using Victors as speed controllers again. But once again, you can use any other legal speed controller hooked up to your CAN bus or to your PWM. I also put my two motors that I'm using for my intake in a speed controller group. This groups the motors together so their actions are identical. This also makes for about 3 fewer lines of code, which isn't a lot, but it counts. You might find, however, that despite the code being identical, that one motor is faster than the other. That's a mechanical issue that you either want to deal with mechanically, or you could then treat each intake motor differently in your code. By that, I mean not grouping them together in a speed controller group and assigning a damper to the motor that's faster, so they're more equal. However, it would be better to see if you can fix the problem mechanically, because having code that changes values statically like this might lead to error later on when the battery is lowering or when you're using different speed values. I made a void method for the intake with variable speed and direction. This way I can use this method as many times as I'd like with as many speed values as I'd like. This beats creating several functions with different speed values, and double that if you need the same speed in opposite directions. If you'd like set speed levels, like low, medium, and high, you can easily set those constants in robotmap.java for easy access, as I've demonstrated here. Here, use a positive speed value as your speed argument. Once again, from 0 to 1, where 0 is 0% and 1 is 100% speed, and true for a forwards direction and false for a backwards direction. If you find that true is sending your motor backward, you can either change the wiring on your robot, or you can switch where the negative sign goes in your code. Here's an example of similar code, but to control only the left intake rather than the whole intake as a system. The next method I made that you might want to use is a joystick-controlled intake command. This sets the speed based on your joystick input. Just like with the drivetrain, the further or harder you push the joystick, the faster the intake will go. Here, I set it to the y-axis, so moving it up and down will control the intake. But you can use the x-axis if you prefer that as well. Again, if the intake is going the opposite direction that you expect, you can either switch the wiring on your robot or add a negative sign to switch the direction. The last method I have in here is a stop motor, for safety reasons. Before we wrap things up completely, let's quickly run through controlling our intake. I made a command called intake command and intake joystick command. Let's go over intake command first. As we can see here, we have the direction and speed parameters so that we can use this command many times in many ways. This forms our constructor. In initialize, we have our safety stop as per usual. Then in execute, our intake takes in the supplied direction and speed values until isFinished returns true. Here, we don't have an end condition because we'll be hooking up our command to a button where it will automatically turn true when we let go of the button. Then in end, we stop the motors once again. Intake joystick is similar, except we don't use the constructor, and it uses the joystick method rather than the intake method from before. In OI, I have hooked up the intake command to 2 separate buttons to a while held method, which means that the command will execute until the operator lets go of the button. For the joystick option, you can either start the command in tally-up on the other joystick like we did with the drive method, or you can do it this way. But you would have to hold down the button to control the joystick-controlled intakes. That's everything for this tutorial. Join us next time for a tutorial on using pneumatics. See you then.